From the dawn of recorded human history, we've been fascinated by things such as the nature and purpose of our existence. Starting in the 6th century BCE, early philosophers such as Socrates and Aristotle wanted to gain a deeper understanding of the human mind and what defines and limits it. It's this ability to question one's own nature, according to some philosophers, which separates a person from any other form of life. However, this assessment is just one of the many definitions of personhood.
That all the proofs of mathematical propositions that were taught me were obviously fallacious. They didn't really prove what they said.
Artificial intelligence itself is applied philosophy.
One of the most discussed topics in modern philosophy is the idea of personhood, which essentially seeks to define what qualities or characteristics separate the life we call people from the life we don't, as well as different societal constructs, which further clarify these distinctions. As is the case with most philosophical questions, there are many theories which define personhood in a variety of ways, each with its own advantages and drawbacks. Perhaps the most basic way of defining personhood is that of the genetic criterion. As the name suggests, this criterion simply states that you are a person if you have human DNA, and you're not a person if you don't. At first glance, this may seem like a satisfying definition to some, but leaves little room for interpretation or growth. For instance, under this definition, if humans were to make contact with extraterrestrial life, no matter their intelligence, they would not be considered people and would not be treated as such. Another instance where this interpretation runs into problems is when considering that, unfortunately, some humans were or are treated as less than people. One of the most widely documented examples of this is early America, where slaves, and really all black Americans, were unfortunately not seen as people from both a societal and legal standpoint. Which brings us to another way of defining personhood, that being the social criteria. The social criteria, while sounding simple, is actually more complex than one would imagine. It essentially states that something is a person if society recognizes them as such. Using this definition can be somewhat challenging due to its ambiguity and the fact that it's subject to interpretation. Not only that, but it allows for the definition of a person to change over time. Going back to the example of slavery, American society had determined that black Americans didn't qualify as people. The general perspective at the time aligned the societal view of them closer to wild animals than human people, a sentiment which has thankfully changed dramatically. In modern times, the definition has shifted to give personhood to individuals outside of white men and the wealthy elite. A fictional demonstration of this perception-based philosophy is present in the Blade Runner film series, where genetic clones of humans aren't seen as people due to the fact that they were grown in a lab rather than born, seen more as a product or tool. In this scene of Blade Runner 2049, the owner of the company responsible for the clones is inspecting one of his products.
The first thought. Every leap of civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. We lost our stomach for slaves, unless engineered. But I can only make so many.
Despite being made of human DNA, these clones are viewed by society as expendable products, a concept which most people don't take issue with due to the societal norms put in place surrounding the treatment of the clones. In modern philosophy, the most commonly observed way to define a person relies on one's mind as opposed to the physical or exterior factors discussed prior. There are two main theories that follow this idea, being the cognitive and sentient criteria. The cognitive criteria lists out certain abilities one must possess to be labeled as a person, which can be summed up in consciousness, reasoning, self-awareness, and the ability to communicate. Whereas the sentient theory takes a more broad approach, saying an individual is a person if they can feel both pleasure and pain. While the definitions skew slightly from one another, these two ideas are quite similar in nature and generally allow for the most expansion and evolution. With the rise of deep learning and text completion algorithms, philosophers have begun to use these criteria to ponder the potential for artificial intelligence to gain personhood in the future. As it currently stands, the algorithms we have now don't display sentience or any real self-awareness, but in the future, the possibility of conscious artificial beings is not out of the question. This ordeal is explored in depth in the movie Ex Machina, where a highly intelligent AI is put to the test.
I'm pleased to meet you, Ava.
I'm pleased to meet you too. I've never met anyone new before. Only Nathan.
Then I guess we're both in quite a similar position.
Haven't you met lots of new people before?
None like you.
Despite being a mechanical collection of materials and code, the AI has sentience and is capable of having complex emotions, meaning under these criteria, it's just as much a person as any human being. While this way of assessing personhood generally tends to be the least problematic, it still raises several questions. For instance, if a human is put into a coma, their lack of sentience implies that their personhood is lost. Despite this shortcoming and the ambiguity that's present in all these theories, using one's psychological abilities is generally considered to be the best way to define a person. This philosophical question is an infinitely complex issue, whether rooted in genetics, society's perception, or the intricacies of the mind. Each theory comes with its own set of challenges and implications. The evolving nature of societal norms, as seen throughout history, help to emphasize the fluidity of these definitions. In synthesizing these perspectives, we're left with a profound realization. Personhood is not a static concept, but a dynamic interplay of genetics, societal values, and cognitive capacities. The journey from ancient musings of philosophers to our contemporary debates on artificial intelligence reflect an ongoing quest to understand the essence of what it means to be a person.